All right, my friends and fellow Brandon Sanderson enthusiasts, it is time that we start a new book, a new chapter, really. It's the dawn of a new era. This is Rhythm of War, part 1. And I am excited to finally get to talk about this book. It's been a long time coming. I had to get dressed up for this one. Now that we're back to business, I'm literally wearing shorts, but you can't see that. So this book starts off with a bang. It reads like the end of one of the other books where everything's coming together and happening so quickly. I noticed that while I was reading part 1, and a friend of mine actually told me that that was done intentionally and that Brandon Sanderson actually noted that he did that on purpose. He wanted part 1 of this book to start off with a bang, and indeed it does. Starting first though with the prologue, we get to see King Gavilar, who we thought we knew, but how naive we were. We thought that we knew him because we had heard stories of what he was like and all this reverence surrounding him from different people, from different characters. But finally we get to see him from one of his most intimate relationships, that being from Navani's perspective, and we see that he is not so much the nice, regal, honorable king that we thought he was. In fact, in the way that is presented in this prologue, he's somewhat of the opposite. We see how horribly he treats Navani. We see that he's just terse with her, short with her, indeed even at times somewhat abusive, at least emotionally, towards Navani. And we get to see a bit more of what lies behind Navani's character, her characteristics at least, and how she treats herself and how she holds herself up. My friend also mentioned this to me, and I noticed it myself, that as we go forward into the chapter, we see that Navani thinks of herself in relatively low regard compared to her abilities and what she contributes to the story, but we'll talk more about that. So we get to see this interesting perspective from Navani, considering the events of the prologue when King Gavilar is killed. And we also are reminded, all the way back to the Way of Kings, that King Gavilar had some secret things going on, and he had a strange gemstone that seemed to be filled with what may be void light. It's somewhat ambiguous at this point, that was taken from him by Zeth whenever he took his life that night. And that's coming back into play as we get more into part 1. So that's just the prologue. This is, strap in for this video, okay? We got a lot to talk about. All right, so we get to see that in the beginning, it opens up with Lirin's perspective. The opening chapter from Lirin's perspective, very interesting choice. It's in a way feels familiar. It feels like it takes us all the way back to the beginning, right? To Kaladin's hometown. We're there with his dad, and he's got some different things going on. He's trying to work a little bit behind the scenes. He's trying to hide the mink who's coming to town, and it's all a part of this grand plan. And one of the fused is looking out for what we think may be the mink, but then at the end of that chapter, we realize that who she's actually looking for is Kaladin, as she describes him. And I think it's important to remember that we're not coming right off the end of Oathbringer. We had Dawnshard in between. So in a way, we're kind of missing Kaladin at this point. He's been hundreds of pages ago, and we're missing seeing Kaladin. And as chapter 1 comes to an end, they pull back his hood, and there he is, and he bursts to light with Stormlight. So it's just like a pretty awesome opening to the book, and it just goes from there. We see him fighting this new type of fused that has the ability to almost teleport back and forth. And again, funny, because back in Dawnshard I was saying that it's almost too juvenile, I want it to be more gritty. Fast forward to this point, now Kaladin's getting stabbed multiple times in the neck. He can barely heal himself with Stormlight before he's getting stabbed again. It's this gruesome battle. It's going on and on and on. And just the fact that this fuse has the ability to teleport in this way, this is a whole new type of enemy that he's gonna have to try to figure out how to fight. And he finds a way to survive, at least, right? And at this point, I'm thinking, does this have to do with the Violet Gemstone? Because I'm fresh off of remembering it from the prologue. Is this ability to teleport like this, is this because of using this sort of dark violet gemstone that seems to have void light? Maybe. So we go forward, and then we get this beautiful chapter where we are, in a way, confronted with the fact that Navani is much more than she gives herself credit for. The fourth bridge, eloquently named after Bridge 4, this flying ship that you could use to do a mass evacuation, which they're doing from Lyran's town, Kaladin's hometown, comes in, and they've built Bridge 4, the actual bridge of theirs, right into the deck. So it's just like this beautiful symbolism, and it's this really cool moment. We see that Navani's starting to have an increase in her self-confidence. Someone tries to tell her to back away from the ledge, and she's like, this is literally my ship, I'll stand where I want. She's got her head held high, which is nice to see. And she's just done so much to try to uncover all these secrets and try to find ways to be useful to everyone around her, using her mind and using her abilities. And we see more about Lyran just being somewhat single-minded. He's always just disappointed in Kaladin, and it just made me think back to my time with surgeons. And God bless them, but sometimes they do seem a bit single-minded. They got a job to do, and they're very focused. So they're very focused on surgery, and makes sense. But Lyran, come on. Kaladin's your son, and he's done so much, and really we see more and more that Kaladin wants his dad to be proud of him. He really regrets the loss of his brother. He doesn't love that he left his hometown, left his parents behind, and he really is yearning for his dad to be proud of him. And Lyran's just always kind of shaking his head in disappointment when it comes to Kaladin. It's somewhat sad to see. I just want to shake Lyran and say, wake up a little bit here. But there's more on that to come, of course. And then we get to Kaladin and Leshwi. He mentions when he's thinking about this fused that she seems to be so high enough in her rank that the other fused defer to her, take orders from her, but not so high that she stands back from the fight altogether. And then he mentions that in that way they seem somewhat similar. And I'm already picking up on this mutual respect between the two of them at this point. And as they fight, we see that they're matching in the moves that they're doing. There's this sort of synchrony between their moveset as they're fighting, and there's just all these parallels between the two of them. I think it's all very intentional the way it's written. So I believe that as the book progresses, there'll be much more to come in that line of thought as to how they're similar and how maybe they're aligned in their ultimate goals. But they're fighting at this point, and they're so similarly matched that it just ends in a draw. We get more from Shallan, and it's just more of this, Shallan, veil is radiant, back and forth, and it's just, again, I've said it before, but it still feels contrived. And the more that the book leans into it, the more contrived it feels. I'm getting annoyed with it. I already said that actually, so I'm continuing to be annoyed with it. There was a time where I said, I believe in a video, that Shallan was becoming my favorite character, and so it's kind of ironic that she's now one of my least favorite characters as the story goes on. So we're gonna return back to that towards the end of the video. Who is my favorite character now? Stay tuned. More information on the Ghost Bloods and how they're influencing the story. What are their goals? They're a much bigger and more important organization than previously thought. And so we're starting to get some more details, more information about them, leaking into the story slowly. And I'm expecting big things from the Ghost Bloods. So we get this scene where Kaladin is somewhat coerced into a room, into a closed space for a fight. He's already really feeling uneasy about this because it gives him less room to maneuver, obviously. And then someone changes void light fabrial, at least that's how it appears, and all of his stormlight is immediately sucked away from him. And he's finds himself, unable to use his abilities. So one, we're thinking, what is this new power that the enemy has, this ability to take away the stormlight? Now I'm really thinking this must be the void light, this ability to be like this anti-stormlight, or that's able to just pull it away from the radiance. But we get a really funny scene out of this that I wanted to note. It's that when he's fighting, the enemy says, "Radiance, you rely too much on your powers. Without them, what are you? You're like a peasant child with no real training in warfare. And at that moment, Kaladin slams himself against the shoulder to his right. The sudden motion caused the singer to cry out and fall backward. Kaladin then yanks the spear from the man's hand and in a fluid motion whips it into a two-handed lunge, impaling the second soldier. The two soldiers on his left recovered and leaped for him. Kaladin felt the wind encircle him as he spun between the two of them, catching one sword, aimed low with the butt of his spear as he caught. Metal met wood with a familiar thunk, and Kaladin finished his spin, throwing off both weapons. He gutted one man, then tripped him, sending him stumbling to the ground in front of his ally. The soldiers were trained well, but they hadn't seen much actual combat, as evidenced by how the remaining singer froze when he saw his friends dying. So Kaladin leaps forward, almost without a thought, spearing the fourth soldier in the neck. Then Kaladin thought, as an expected ribbon of red light came darting toward him, he will go for my back again. Kaladin dropped his spear, pulled a throwing knife off his belt, and turned. He rammed the knife into the air right before the fuse appeared, slamming the small blade into the creature's neck, angled between two pieces of carapace. So there he's giving this monologue, this like anime villain monologue about how you poor Radiance, you know, you're nothing without your powers. And then Kaladin's like, I actually have years and years of training and experience prior to having any of my radiant abilities, and he just pulls this off all in one big fluid motion. It was a pretty hilarious scene. Then we get Moash back in the story, and this is also when we start to see some more detail about what's really going on with Kaladin. We get some hints on it up to this point that something deeper is going on with Kaladin, and Moash enters the chat, and we need to kick him out because he's just telling Kaladin essentially, you know, Kaladin, remember that time you almost jumped into the chasms when you're about to give up on it all? Yeah, you should do that. And it's almost surprising that Kaladin sits there and just listens to this. You know, we feel like Kaladin could certainly just do more. He could take Moash out right now if he wanted to, but I think it speaks to the deeper thing that's going on with Kaladin, and that's that Kaladin seems to be depressed. And there's even mention from Syl that when his stormlight fades away, the light that's covering up this depression fades away. He has more of a flat affect and he's more down and sad, and it's more easy to see what's really happening with him. So he's using stormlight to cover this up all the time, to mask it. And so I think that in this part of the story, when Moash is talking to him, he's really kind of speaking to that depressed side of Kaladin with this, guilt. This guilt that's consuming him and these catastrophic thoughts, and he's just really tapping into that, and it kind of catches Kaladin off guard as he speaks to that part of him. And I think that's what puts him in this sort of kind of trance where he's just kind of froze up and listening to Moash and not sure what to do, because that darker side of Kaladin, that depressed side of him, kind of identifies with what Moash is saying. So pretty sad to see. Later we get some more information from Moash, that Moash mentions he takes my pain. Speaking of Odium, and we saw at the end of Oathbringer that Odium wanted Dalinar to make that same proverbial deal with the devil. Dalinar, of course, did not, but we see that Moash did. He takes my pain. I just wanted to play into that a little bit. What does that mean exactly? We can overthink it like we do many things on this channel. I think that taking his pain away, taking away any sense of guilt, any sense of empathy, turning him into what is essentially a true psychopath, a true, antisocial personality that has no concern for others, feels no guilt, feels no empathy, and is able to just act on whatever seems to bring them more power by giving away this sense of pain to Odium. Having Odium take that away so that he can employ whatever means necessary to reach Odium's goals. And Moash probably thinks that in some ways these are his goals, but Odium's smarter than Moash, we presume. And he's certainly manipulating Moash and using him for his own means. So, R.I.P. Moash, but I don't think it's going to end well for him. So we get some more information around Shallan, talking to Mraize. And Mraize has asked her to go to Shadesmar, to the Fortress of the Honor Blades, which is called Lasting Integrity. And if he does this, she will then be able to ask him whatever she wants from the Ghostbloods. They'll spill all the beans. They'll tell her all the information that she wants to know. And of course, Shallan wants to understand things from the level of a scholar. She wants to ask all these questions about the world, because as Mraize is talking, we start to hear more about how there's much more than this world that Roshar is on. There are other worlds out there, and that the story just keeps expanding beyond our earlier imaginations. But so there's that part of Shallan that just wants to understand things from a scholar's perspective. But then there's the more personable part of Shallan who's actually thinking, and she says this, that if she has the ability to get all this information from the Ghost Bloods on Earth, if she's ever able to just ask them whatever's on her mind, that she might be able to ask them specifically about her past, because she recognizes that there are many memories that she's lost. They may be repressed, or for whatever reason she can't access them, and she's hoping that this can help fill the holes in her memory by being able to ask them questions, and that might help her to heal and feel more whole herself. So in this way, we're circling back around to this whole idea of Shallan and her multiple personas. How much is Brandon Sanderson trying to purposefully play into this idea of dissociative identity disorder? I think that part of what irks me about this is because of my particular profession, and that I care more about the portrayal of this, and I understand how it's generally not a positive thing. This is actually something that people really suffer with, this dissociation, this past trauma. Well, Shallan does fit that bill. And her insight here that maybe if she could bring up those repressed memories and face them again, come to understand them more from a perspective of her new identity as an adult, someone who's no longer in that situation, then she could find some sense of healing. And that's all technically correct from a psychodynamic perspective. So now I'm feeling like, well, if he is going to finally bring it around full circle, and he even uses Adolin to bring this point home, that even Adolin sees that it's actually not healthy what's going on with Shallan. He has this conversation with Kaladin, in confidence, and he says, hopefully Kaladin, if we can figure out what's going on with you and your depression, presumably, then we can figure out what's going on and how to help Shallan. So that's really what was irking me so much about this, was that the story kept playing into it, and everyone around her was acting like, oh, this is totally normal and cool, and I'm kind of overthinking it maybe, that no, this is not good. This is not good for Shallan. She's convincing herself that this is okay, but she's decompensating further and further. And now that the book is coming around full circle and saying, we know this is not okay, and maybe there's a way that we can find some healing for Shallan, now I'm feeling a little bit more okay with the way that this was progressing. Still find it a little annoying, the way that it's used in the story, and she's always just jumping back and forth between these characters, and particularly when she's in her own mind talking to her different personas as if they're distinct persons. Anyways, moving on. We get this scene where Kaladin is confronted, we could say, by Dalinar. He has a meeting with Dalinar, and Dalinar's like, Kaladin, you're not doing too well. You've got too much pent up inside of you. You've seen too much in battle. And because I care about you, I'm asking you to step aside from all this constant fighting. I'm not demoting you. I'm just putting you in a new position. I want you away from immediate battle. This really hurts Kaladin. It really hits him. And at the same time, he recognizes that Dalinar does care about him. That's what's different about Dalinar. He's not taking something away from Kaladin just to exert his power over him, but because he actually cares about him. And Kaladin understands on a deeper level that this is what he needs. He needs some time away to face what's going on inside of him, to figure out a new way forward. And because of all of this, Kaladin goes and he seeks out Xyle because he wants to talk with him and get his opinion on maybe what he should do going forward. Kaladin starts thinking, maybe I should be an Ardent. Many of the Ardents are past, or former soldiers. Maybe that's my path forward as well. Xyle's like, no, Kaladin, this is not the life for you. You don't fight because of the thrill, or for power, or for fame, or fortune, or money, or whatever. You fight because it's just a part of who you are. And being an Ardent, that's not who you are, Kaladin. And then he goes and he tells Kaladin how he is a type 2 invested entity rather than a type 1 invested entity, which he suggests that Syl is, for example, and how he's been alive for millennia because his soul was like an imprint of his former soul and all this. And it's just like, whoa, what is going on? We've got all of these different things. We've got Shadesmar. We thought that was crazy enough, but now we've got other worlds off of Roshar. We've got different levels of, even the people of Roshar thought that there were gods, and then gods of the gods, and then gods of the gods of the gods, and it just keeps expanding further. And now we've got this new information from Xyle that there are type 1 and type 2 invested entities, and I'm not even sure how that plays in to the story fully yet. But it's all just blowing up. It's just getting too much, and it's keeping it interesting though, that's for sure. I wanted to go over a few funny things to lighten the mood before we wrap this video up, and that's Adolin in his high fashion. Adolin is always depicted as having a personal tailor, and he's always wearing these extravagant outfits. And there's this scene where he's got his feet kicked up on the table and Navani's looking, and she's like, this is the 3rd pair of gold trim boots that you've worn this week. And she's also like, you only put your feet up on the table when you're wearing really nice shoes. And then Dalinar walks in and he like slaps Adolin's boots, get them off the table. And then he says to Shallan, Adolin wasn't like this until you came along. And we get all of this Kholin family dynamic humor, very rare brand of humor. And then we get Dalinar mentioning to the mink, he's like, yeah, I hope that your kids aren't this frivolous. And the mink's like, yeah, my kids are dead. So that's just very blunt. And this is like the end of that conversation. It's like, geez. And then we get Shallan and Dalinar showing off their skills with their map creating abilities to the mink. And then it depicts this really funny aspect of it where they're like zooming in and out and then saying it's a still image, but it updates ever so often as the the storm goes around Roshar, just like satellites. And I'm like, this is literally Google Maps. And it's just funny, them like zooming in and out on the map. Then Yasna and Wit come in, and then we get this idea that there's been some rumors that maybe Yasna and Wit are together, which is wild. I'm not mad about it, but it's wild. And then we get a really wholesome wrap up towards the end of part 1 where they finally reach Urithiru with all the people from Kaladin's hometown, and he has set aside a specific quarters for his mom and dad. And then the big surprise is unveiled that he's got a new surgical suite all prepared with new instruments, new medications for his dad. And he's just so excited to show his dad what he's done for him. And again, Lirin just kind of sulks down, and Kaladin is left wanting more once again. But the reason for it is actually a bit more reasonable than maybe initially expected, and that's that Lirin is now realizing that with the Radiance, he feels that his calling and his necessity of him being a surgeon, that the necessity of him being a surgeon and taking his job so seriously has been rendered obsolete by the fact that the Radiance can now heal people with a touch of a hand. And Kaladin sees this, and he explains to him, look, there are only so many Radiants, and oftentimes we end up needing all of them and still needing more, and you'll always be needed as a surgeon, Dad. And then he says, Dad, also, I have to step away from battle for a time. And this is finally when we get to see Lirin, of course, smile widely, and he's like, so this means that you'll come back to training with me, and you'll be a surgeon like we've always wanted? And that wasn't lost on me that Lirin said, like, we've always wanted, and Kaladin's thinking, yeah, like, you've always wanted, but at the end of the day, yeah, I suppose that's what I'm gonna do. I can't see myself doing anything else. If I can't fight, I'll be a surgeon. So it comes back around to how Kaladin's always been torn between these two paths that he's seen for himself. And as it all wraps up, we get a meeting with all of the royalty from around Roshar, and we see more from Taravangian. He's just up to no good. The Mink has suggested new battle plans for the war. They think Taravangian's going to be opposed to this, but he's all on board with it. So now they're thinking, what are we missing here? I definitely do not trust Taravangian. Although I think he's a more ambiguous character. I don't think that he's just all bad. And he even is really upfront with it. He says, you know, I do what I do for the good of everyone. Maybe he's misguided, but maybe in the end, you know, I hold some room for the fact that in the end, we may see that Taravangian does some amount of good, but I don't know. I don't trust him. And then we see that the Radiants suggest that they meet with the Honor Spren, and so they put together a coalition of different Radiants to go and do that as we wrap up part 1. All right. This may be the longest video on the series so far, but I said that we would talk about my favorite character in the story. Used to be Shallan. It's not Shallan anymore, but I thought about it. Who is my favorite character now? And I know the answer, but I should maybe wait for the next video. I appreciate your time watching this video. And if there's anything from part 1 that you want to discuss or that you had questions about, then let me know. Like this video if you enjoy it. We're back with more Stormlight Archives. And my favorite character is Syl, obviously. It's Syl. All right, I'll see you in the next one.